right, so what I'm tying here is an Isonychia Soft Hackle. It's based on an old Preston Jennings pattern. I've kind of tweaked it a little bit and put my own touches to it. It's worked very well for me the last few years. For a hook, I'm using a size 12 Ahrex FW570, and it's actually a long shank dry fly hook, but it works really, really well for this pattern. For thread, I'm keeping it nice and small. This is brown 12/0. I'm going to get it started on the hook shank, leaving about an eye length space behind the back edge of the hook eye, and just snip that excess tag off. First material to get tied in is going to be pheasant tail fibers. These are pheasant tail fibers that are dyed brown, dyed a chocolate brown. Isonychia nymphs have fairly short tails on them, frilly little tails, and traditionally people used peacock swords for the tails, but these are just a little more durable, and I don't know, it's about a half dozen that I tie in. I'm going to pull up and toward me on the tails as I do this. That helps to keep them centered right on top of the hook shank, like that. And just snip off the excess up front. Now, next to go in is the rib of the fly, and I'm using UTC gold ultra wire, size small. Kind of important to get that over to the far side of the hook. The reason for that is when we go to wrap that around the abdomen of the fly, I want the first wrap to contact the underside of the hook so it doesn't jostle that delicate pheasant tail. Next to go in is white UTC 140 thread. You can use a floss if you'd like. This is for the stripe that goes down the back of many Isonychia nymphs. And it's one of the things that I've added to the pattern just to dress it up a little bit. I'm going to go back up to about midway between the midpoint of the hook shank. Next to get tied in is I'm going to create the body of the fly, and I'm using a Isonychia colored fine and dry dubbing. When I dub, I really like to take the fibers, whatever they are, beaver, muskrat, rabbit, doesn't matter, and I'll pull the fibers apart several times. In the textile industry, this is called carding, and it helps to get those fibers aligned. Now they're aligned with their parallel to the hook shank or my tying bench. I'm going to rotate them 90 degrees. What this allows me to do is just to squeeze between my fingertips, pull up, and keep those fibers aligned now with my tying thread. So when you twist them on, they're nice and elongated parallel to your tying thread, lots of surface area to contact. I also leave the bottom part of that noodle untwisted so I can take the next clump, also in line with my tying thread, and just sort of weave it in there with the previous one. Same here. I'm just going down, developing a nice, slender, and cohesive noodle with my tying thread. Then you know, if you have any little low spots that you want to take care of, you can just go back in and fill them in. No big lumps and bumps. That's the real advantage of keeping those fibers aligned with your tying thread. I'm going to go back in, get that dubbing to start right at the base of the tail, and then take touching to overlapping wraps. Let me give that one a little twist, so it's a little lumpy. Go up the hook shank. I need to add just a little bit more dubbing, which is okay. It's always better to have not enough than trying to pull off excess dubbing when you have too much. Very common problem actually in fly tying. So I'm just going to kind of go back, dress that front edge of that body up a little bit, and end right there. All right, Next step is to get hold of that white thread, lock that down well, but very important, I've had these pull out before, so I'm going to take some thread wraps back over top to double that back and really lock it down. And on these, you know, most times I'm going to take 5 wraps, but here I'm going to try to sneak in 6 wraps with the wire. And again, you can see by pulling under and touching the underside of the hook shank first, I don't disturb that delicate pheasant tail. So just an extra segment in there. The wraps are a little closer together. There's something about the look of it with the Isonychia that I really like, the extra wrap or 2. A few more segments. I'm going to take the wire and just helicopter rather than cut it off. When you cut it off, you're always left with a little nubbin that will just haunt you till the end of days. It sticks out. A couple dozen thread wraps won't cover it up. So for the thorax of the fly, I'm going to pull out just 3 strands of peacock herl, snip the brittle tips off, anchor them to the near side of the hook, actually take a few thread wraps right up onto the body of the fly, not too far back, but importantly, I'm going to wrap these herls behind my tying thread. And that way you're pulling up pretty much on the whole weight of the bobbin. And what that does is it keeps the herls nicely sandwiched together. You don't want one running up the hook shank before all the others. And this keeps everything nice and fluffy and looking good. All right, so there's the thorax, body. We're ready for the soft hackle. For the soft hackle, I'm using a brown mottled hen feather. It's from a breeder in Pennsylvania, so fairly local to where we are now. I want to, with the shiny side of the feather facing me, I'm going to strip off the lower fibers here. I want the lowest fibers to be reach from about the back edge of the hook eye to the hook point. So that's about right. Then what I'm going to do is I'm going to hold the feather by its tip, stroke down some of the fibers like so. I'm going to use my fly as a little workbench to steady my hands. Snip that tip off, leaving a small triangular tie-in anchor. I'm going to secure the anchor to that little space that we've left behind the hook eye. Wrap rearward, get that locked down really well. And then what I like to do, pull the feather up. You have to be a little careful. These stems are fairly brittle. Stroke those fibers rearward like so. And then that's 1 wrap, and we're another half wrap. That looks real good in terms of the amount of hackle fibers for this fly. Some like them a bit sparser, but on this particular pattern, I like a little bit more. Now, what I'm going to do, that's looking pretty good. I want to start creating the head on the fly. And importantly, when you're doing this, once you get everything covered up or thereabouts, end with your thread right at the back edge of the head, the base of the hackle, and then stop wrapping. We all have the tendency to just put too many thread wraps. It makes for a big head and it just doesn't look as good. So with that done, stop right there at the back edge of the head, just a little bit of Vineyard's tying wax for grip on there. And then I'm going to do a left to right or back to front whip finish. All the way up to the back edge of the hook eye. Got to make sure you seat that knot. really well. It's like any other knot. It's only as good as how well it's seated. Then I put a little tension on it, pull it toward me, and I have a little chisel on the back of my Mattarelli whip finish tool. Just touch it, the thread parts, and we're looking pretty good. Last step here, and it's important too, you really need to get a drop of head cement right on those thread wraps. Let it sink in and dry, and that prevents the head wraps from coming unraveled. Always a good idea to use your bodkin. Just make sure that that hook eye is clear of adhesive. And there it is. That's the Isonychia Soft Hackle, kind of wet fly. And it's great swung, dead drifted if you'd like. You can add some motion to it. Isonychia nymphs are really, really good swimmers. And if you'd like, you can even put some floating on it, dry it out, and fish it in the film if they're fish rising.